Welcome to the Plant Fit Summit, bringing you the best in plant-based health and fitness. This is Luke and Toby, and today we have Dr. Vandana Shiva. Dr. Shiva is an Indian scholar, environmental activist, food sovereignty advocate, speaker, and author of more than 20 books, including Oneness versus the 1% and Stolen Harvest. We start the conversation with Dr. Shiva sharing about why food has turned from nourishment to the biggest threat to human health in recent times. Enjoy the presentation.
You know, I'm trained in physics, but for the last 35 years, I've tried to figure out exactly what happened when people died in the city of Bhopal in 1984 because a pesticide plant leaked. Punjab, where I'd done my MSc honors in particle physics, erupted in violence in 84. And I said, something's going on with this system, which is killing thousands. In that 1 year, 30,000 were killed in Punjab. And I said, what is going on? And I decided to study what had happened to the food system. And I did a book then for the United Nations University. It's called The Violence of the Green Revolution. First thing that happened is a group of companies that had been asked by Hitler to make chemicals to gas people and to make ways to make ammunitions, took the nitrogen fixing technologies by burning fossil fuels at high temperature, which makes ammunitions on the one hand, but it also makes synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. The xylon bees and the poison gases are the ancestors of the pesticides. Now, under normal circumstances, if you have democracy, wars have ended, this group of companies were tried at Nuremberg. The entire human rights edifice grew out of the Nuremberg trials. And yet, they genetically engineered themselves into agrochemical companies. And in effect, just rewrote the story of agriculture and food. And I only woke up to the rewriting in 1984 when I did my book. But then 87, I woke up to the fact that they had been selling chemicals and now they wanted to own our seed. And they said, we have to patent the seed, we have to genetically modify the seed, and we need an international treaties. That's when I started to dedicate myself to saving seeds and studying life. It's not my chosen field. I, in fact, walked out of biology class because I love physics and this looks so boring. And today my life is dedicated to learning from nature. So if you were to ask me, summarize three things. First thing that went wrong, why has food become a reason of sickness? Chemicals that were designed to kill people have become agrochemicals, agrotoxins. They're giving us cancer. They're giving us all kinds of metabolic disorders. The second thing they've done is they have created monopoly on seed and spread monocultures, which means the benefits of biodiversity that we need for our health are disappearing. And the third is a war has been declared on the land and small farmers, for which the economic system has been changed, whether it be through calculations of productivity, efficiency. You know, I spent all my scientific training looking at this for the last 35 years. But they've created free trade agreements like the GATT, the WTO, to destroy agriculture. And they've naturalized it, just like colonialism naturalized the conquest of other countries. This 100 years of history, we will not understand what went wrong till we understand the links to Hitler's concentration camps.
That's a shocking link that you bring up. Why wasn't it stopped? Or what has been, you know, what has other organizations or governments tried to stop it? Because if that link was so clear of where it originated from, how has it come to this far?
Well, you know, I woke up to this only in 84 because of what happened to the land where I had studied. But it had been already announced, the link had been made in Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, where she said people who had got used to making profits selling chemicals and poisons continued to push species to extinction. Silent Spring meant the birds don't sing anymore. Why do the birds sing anymore? because the pesticide damage. And even earlier than that, Albert Howard, who was sent by the British to improve Indian agriculture, because that's part of colonialism. They can't accept a culture for what it is. They can't expect a species for what it is. They can't accept to leave food as it is. They have to improve it. And right now, the fake food fashion is about improving food. Food is unimproved technology. And fake food is improved technology. So the measures shift. But Albert Howard, who came to India and said, I can't improve this farming. This farming is brilliant. It's based on biodiversity. It's based on return. It has stood its ground for 40 centuries. How can I teach farmers how to farm? I'll make them my professors. He made the Indian peasant his professor and wrote the book, The Agricultural Testament, which is called the Bible of modern organic farming. So anyone who turns to organic should remember it was peasant farming that was distilled into science by Howard. Howard has a whole para there. Companies that had got used to making profits during the war could not give up that addiction. So we had the top scientists, Albert Howard, Rachel Carson, warning. Why was the link not made? Because when you make that kind of money, and if you have a handful of billionaires controlling half the wealth of the world, they'll tell a story they want to tell. But this company, and at that point it included IG Farben and Standard Oil. Well, Standard Oil continued, Rockefeller, then many oil companies and the fossil, and I would say to the people who are worried about fossil fuels, go back and look at Rockefeller, but look at fossil fuels in the food system. Rockefeller then was behind pushing the so-called Green Revolution in India. And today Bill Gates is pushing it in Africa, and a new report has just come out talking about the total failure. Well, we know soil and biodiversity is what makes food. Poisons kill the life that makes food. So if you think of it ecologically, it had to happen. And the lobbies became so powerful. The first thing they changed was agriculture, education. Next thing they changed was the idea about food. When I talk to children in schools, I ask them, I said, what is food? It's the fuel that runs the machine that is our body. This mechanistic training has been given so deeply. And in fact, fake food is building on that mechanical training, that all you need is first, you take real sugar. My country is the land where sugarcane was domesticated. We made the original sugars. We still make them. And they don't cause diabetes. They're in fact healers. The British learned how to turn it into industrial sugar. That became, like they say, the white poison. They learned how to pick up Africans and take them as slaves for the sugar plantations. And we know what has happened, whether it's the diabetes epidemic or the racism involved. All of this was silenced because the narrative was grown that white sugar is superior, the other stuff is black, it's inferior. It's not clean because it's made artisanally. This is made in factories. Synthetic fertilizers are pure, they're white, urea. And cow dung is black and dirty. So it was a cultural shift, it was a political shift, it was an educational shift, and it was a hijack of policymaking, which we have seen intensify in the last decade. And Brexit, in fact, the story of Brexit should be told as a story of England being lobbied to exit from the European rules of food standards and food safety.
So you bring up so many points. I don't even know which one to pick up, but one of the core concepts that I love from your work is the idea of nutrition or health per acre rather than, like calories or whatever other measurement they want to talk about. So can you elaborate of what that concept represents and why it's so important for us to understand the modern system?
So when I was doing my book on the Green Revolution, my eyes could tell me that these fields of monoculture of rice and monocultures of wheat are very sad and very pathetic. compared to the fields up in my mountain region. The fields of Navdanya, which means 9 seeds, which is the name of the movement I started. The fields of Baranaj, 12 crops together, dense. I said, how can a sad monoculture with very low productivity be declared as more productive than this abundance of life? And I started to work on biodiversity-based productivity. I said this productivity measure is wrong of monoculture commodities. But the key measure, which is still driving industrialization of food and farming, is yield per acre. And I started to question in my mind, what does yield per acre tell you? It only tells you the commodity, its weight that left the farm. It doesn't tell you what state the land was left in, whereas agriculture of 1,000 years, 40,000 years, basically 60,000 years, has had only one objective: how to leave the soil richer by your actions in agriculture. It doesn't tell you what is the state of the farmer. And that's why the more the yield of a cow, the fewer the farmers. Yeah? So yield increase is inversely proportional to the health of the land and the well-being of farmers. But what does it leave? It leaves, you just measure the weight. But the weight doesn't tell you anything, because it doesn't tell you, A, if it's nutritionally empty, and all the research is showing 60% to 70% of the nutrition in food has disappeared in industrialized countries. And it doesn't tell you what are the toxics in it. I always find it a scandal that organic has to label itself, and the toxic food doesn't have to put a label. When you eat this apple sprayed by this and this and this, you're having these chemicals whose proven impact is this, 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 this. That should be the true, honest labeling. So I said, this doesn't tell you anything. And I had started to measure biodiversity productivity. And I said, what matters is health per acre and nutrition per acre. So I took the official data on the nutrition of different crops. We'd anyway, without farmers, measured productivity, converted that productivity into nutritional output. We can feed 2 times India's population if we do the right kind of farming. And we then have created another indicator called wealth per acre, because we constantly told farmers must have bigger dairies to earn more money, and they go out of dairy. They must have larger canola farms, and they go out of farming. You must have even bigger industrial farms, and the farmers are disappearing. But it's always, you earn more money, you earn more money, you earn more money. The truth isn't told about nutrition, so we said we'll tell the truth about nutrition per acre, and the truth isn't told about true cost. So we wrote a book called Wealth Per Acre, and Well-Being Per Acre should be a next book I'm going to write.
I can't wait for that one to come out. You mentioned that 60 to 70% of the nutrition has been lost in industrialized farming systems. So how did you come to that conclusion? And can you give some examples of maybe, like micronutrients or anything where it differs between a sustainable system that you are advocating versus an industrial system that's so prevalent?
So some of it has come from our own research. And I work with a world community of farmers and researchers and scientists. And I would recommend to you our book, which is available on the Navdanya website. If you go to Navdanya, you'll find this report on health and nutrition per acre, where we have synthesized not just our nutritional output, that's the level of detail we did, but also the studies at that time. I have worked with scientists who actually do the nutritional studies. And what is being recognized is, because of size, if we bred peach, we had smaller peaches, and the new breeding is big peaches. We had small apples, and now we have big apples. We had nice tomatoes, and now we have big tomatoes. So bigness was treated as superiority, which should be the logic of a cancer cell. It's the only cell that doesn't know when to stop growing. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Healthy cells stay small, stay to their scale, and renew and replenish themselves. So this idea of bigness doesn't capture anything. New research is showing that indigenous seeds are nutritionally dense. And a colleague in the European Institute in Sardinia has worked out how indigenous fruits, which are much smaller, have 40 to 50 times more nutrition than the new breeding. But an even more important study in Sardinia has shown that people live up to 100 years. In the areas where the farming is still ancient farming, they work their farms, they eat the old crops, and they're not growing commodities. And they're living up to 100 years, average age. Just look for Sardinia and you'll get this data. But my own research and my own thinking has been that if you add more nutrition to the soil will have more nutrition. And I want to share with you our data on, let me see if I can find this very quickly for you. Mm-hmm. We have very detailed studies on soil. We did a 20-year analysis of our valley, including our farm. And we compared, the top soil ecologist of India did this for us. And we compared chemical soils, the farms that had been farmed chemically for 20 years, and farms that had been farmed continuously organically for 20 years. And then we looked at different crops, about 10 kinds of crops, so that the data came not just from one kind of crops, but from mustard and wheat. And let me just read out this data to you. So the organic matter in these 20 years has gone down by 14% in the chemical farms because it replenishes no organic matter. It's only putting nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It has increased between 29 to 99%. And the difference is because there are different crops being grown by different farmers. But more interestingly, when you put synthetic nitrogen, you imagine you have more nitrogen in the soil. In the chemical farms, the nitrogen has gone down between 7 to 22%. By applying more nitrogen that originated in Hitler's ammunition factories, you're actually robbing the soil of 22%. And then in the organic farms, it's increased 21 to 100%. But for potassium, phosphorus, NPK, you know, the chemical agriculture is an NPK agriculture because these can be commodified and industrially produced. But we need zinc. The zinc has gone down up 37% in the organic, in the chemical soils, and gone up 14% in the organic soils. Magnesium and zinc, I had a public health, top leading public health scientist from Australia visit the farm. And this study had just been completed and I was showing her this result. He says, all falls into place. As a public health scientist, I'm finding huge amounts of depression among teenagers. And I do the biochemistry of the brain to understand what's going on. And they all have zinc deficiency. And I can't figure out why they have zinc deficiency. But now, seeing the way you farm tells me that our foods are nutritionally empty because we don't have zinc in the soil. The zinc won't go to the plant. It won't come to our diet. So zinc down 37%, up 14%. Magnesium, which has been researched as being a big contributor, its deficiency being a big contributor to attention deficit, it has gone down 17% and up 14% in organic. And iron, which is a big deficiency in the world, has gone down 12%. So the issue is you don't give back to soil, you're robbing the soil. So the soil, which doesn't only have what you give into it, but it has this amazing soil web, which is then creating nutrition. And then that is taken up by plants. And when we grow different kinds of plants, they take up the nourishment in different ways and amplify it. So these micronutrients and trace elements that are rich in the soil that get multiplied further in plants. And when we eat a diversity of these plants, the phytochemicals in those plants, they nourish our gut. That is the secret of health, and its absence is the secret of disease.
You just mentioned the word a web, and I know you talk about a food web, which I thought is a fascinating idea, how everything is interconnected. Can you share a bit about what the food web is, and how does it compare to, let's say, a standard approach where humans go about everyday life and we, like kind of are, distanced from nature and see ourselves somewhat separate?
So, because the economy we have today grew out of colonialism, the industrial agriculture we have today grew out of Hitler's concentration camps. They have only two logics to them. For colonialism, extract what is valuable. For Hitler, exterminate what you see as an enemy. Now, between this logic of extraction and extermination, you have created a system where everything flows linearly and then you bombard. At the end of it, for citizens, all they're relating to is food as a commodity that came out of this extractive system. What is in the commodity? How was it produced? The story of it is also in the hands of those who control this extractive food chain. Yeah, I call it the linear extractive system. Food is the currency of life. The currency means maintaining the current, maintaining the flow. This flow of life is the nutrition cycle. Scientifically, I know that. The food web is the nutrition cycle understood in depth. The soil is not an empty container, as I realized the textbooks taught when I did my book on the Green Revolution. Soil is an empty container. Since then, I have the soil is a rich soil food web with amazing organisms. We don't create those organisms. We give a tiny bit of food and they make food for us. They give us more than we give them. Plants have a web amongst themselves. And now new research is showing that the mycorrhizal fungi allow plants to communicate. It's being done a lot on forest tissues, but we know mycorrhizal fungi are everywhere. And I think the next step of a burst of independent thinking, because the other thinking will take you down the mechanical way, will be about how intelligent these systems are. Yeah? And then we're doing research on our farm right now. We were just saving seeds. And we've saved 4,000 varieties of rice across the country. India is the home of rice. Our farmers took one wild plant called Oryza sativa, turned it into 200,000 rices, 200,000 rices. When we started, I could rescue 4,000 in different parts because you can't grow the same rice anywhere. But in Dehradun, in my valley, we can grow about 750. And we have just planted them and they're growing. When you grow different crops, insects have an amazing food system. And when different insects flourish, not only did Hitler turn some humans, he decided, were enemies to be exterminated, the people who used those chemicals later to advertise them decided that every insect would be declared an enemy and declared a war on bugs. So you now have Insectageddon. Today I was reading 93% of the bumblebees are gone. 70% of the insects of the world. These insects are necessary for the web of life and the food web for two reasons. Without the pollination by pollinators, we won't have food. We've done research on our farm, 1/3 of the food we eat, because we did actually controlled experiments. 1/3 comes from pollinators. And we think the chemicals are feeding us. But the second reason we need insects is when there's a flourishing of insects. They're intelligent enough to work out an amazing web. And that web in science is called the pest-predator relationship. The ladybird beetle would eat an aphid. And it is amazing. And I think one of the things the Westerners really need to learn, especially young people, who are picking up the Cartesian thought very, very quickly and are picking up anthropocentrism in a new way. All life is intelligence. Life in the food web is intelligence. Plants are intelligence, microbe are intelligence. Mycorrhizal fungi knows exactly what to get from where and give it to which plant. All this is being scientifically researched in a very sophisticated way. So anyone who thinks plants are dead inert matter because Descartes told us hasn't fully completed the food revolution. Plants are intelligent, microbes are intelligent. And if they are living, they are sentient beings. We need to respect them. Does respect in the food web means no one eats anyone? No, we wouldn't have a web. If food is the nourishing cycle, what moves between things is food. If the bacteria did not eat the plants that are in the soil, the organic matter, we wouldn't have the mycorrhiza. We won't then have the others. So you have to have species eating each other. The eating is not the problem. Eating violently is the problem. What is violent eating? Not knowing when to stop. Yeah. So if I have a factory farm with 100,000 chicken and I treat them violently, that's violent. I have worked enough with indigenous people who have sacred species. The indigenous people of the Americas, the salmon is sacred. Does it mean they don't eat the salmon? No, they pray to the salmon and say, thank the salmon for the gift. And they say, we will not take more than we need. So the logic of nonviolence is not taking more than your need, having reference for that which nourishes you in the food web, and not having a stupid illusion that if I stopped eating even non-violent relationship with animals, but ate a diet of violent GMO-based soya, impossible burger with 14 patents made in a lab, I'm going to save the planet. No, you won't save the planet. You won't save your health. And I have a book coming out which deals with this in a lot of detail, The Future of Food, Health, and Humanity.
You speak of biodiversity a lot. Why is it so important to have a diverse like you already explained it to why it's important in a natural system, but for the future and, like to future-proof our society, why is it important to have biodiversity in our food system from the ground up?
So my work in Vandana was really conserving seeds because I didn't want Monsanto's monopoly. It was as simple as that. I wanted to save our diversity and not allow monocultures, like I had witnessed the rice and wheat monocultures in the Green Revolution in Punjab. And as I could anticipate, if soya is patented, Roundup Ready soya is patented, then every animal will be fed GMO soya and put in a factory farm, will be removed as a free-range animal. I could see that when GMO corn is pushed, there'll be no native corn left. So biodiversity for me was the place for saving seed. And then biodiversity taught me the rest. Everything I've learned ecologically in the field is the web of life is a biodiversity web, because you can't, if you have exactly what I have, I can't be engaged in mutuality. Mutuality means you have to be a bit different from me. Now, if you had been through all of life's experiences that I have been, why would you be talking to me? If you had it all, if the mutuality and the giving comes because we are diverse. And as diversity, we have something to give to each other. In the web of life, what we give is food, which is nourishment, which is nutrition. You can use 20 kinds of language. If you're a scientist, use the nutritional side. If you are just talk about the sacred food web, you can how you describe this, but the process doesn't change. And now, after having done all this work, I realized the food issue is so related to biodiversity, not only because we produce more, but we need diversity. And let me read out from my book, Annam, Food for Health, where a group of where I did a lot of the work. Ayurvedic physicians worked with us, public health doctors worked with us. And this is what scientists are now realizing. The multitude of phytochemicals derived from a diet rich in diverse plants, combined with the array of perfectly matching sensory mechanisms in our gut, synchronizes our internal ecosystem, our gut microbiome, with the world around us. And I have another book I wrote a foreword to, where the chef and the leading scientist in France, Seralini, who did the first work on the GMO and the cancer, and was attacked by Monsanto. All of us who've spoken the truth have been attacked and attacked and attacked. But the beauty about speaking and living the truth is you don't get exhausted. And beyond a point, they do. So, in fact, Monsanto has disappeared and it's a Bayer now. And I don't know how many mutations Bayer will have to go through and how long they'll try these tricks. But we have launched a campaign on poison-free farming, but also a global movement for seed freedom to grow biodiversity. It's our duty to the earth. It's our duty to the land, but it is also our duty to our own health.
You also connect how we grow our food with climate change and the future of how you call it, climate chaos. So where are those links? Because there is obviously, when we see food on our plate, we don't look at it and see fossil fuels, or we don't look at it and see climate crisis. Yeah. But how does the link work, and what are some of the data points maybe that you found in your research regarding that?
So, I was writing to prepare for the Copenhagen Conference on Climate. And I realized that the word agriculture was missing in the climate discussions. It was also missing in the climate movement language. But I decided to add the different parts of the categories that the Intergovernmental Panel in Climate Change actually measures. So they do measure food and agriculture, but only production. They do measure land use, which basically is deforestation of the Amazon for GMO soya. They measure industry, but what is industry? Industrial processing, making aluminum for packaging, they measure transport. But the biggest thing we are moving around as we destroy local food system is food. So I then wrote a book called Soil, Not Oil, where I did the first assessment of how these categories add up to a food system. Because people normally look only at agriculture. And let me read out the categories. So agriculture itself, which includes the fossil fuels, the giant machineries, and every time they talk about efficiency, they're ignoring the fact that every so-called efficiency by getting rid of human beings is using more fossil fuels and more energy slaves. This includes then fossil fuels used for synthetic fertilizers. That's 11 to 15% straight out. But then you take land use, which is converting large areas of forests or savannas into growing industrial food like GMO soya or palm oil. That is about 15 to 18% of the emissions. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. The processing, transport, retail is 15 to 20%. And as Amazon, Mr. Jeff Bezos got richer in this lockdown by about $56 billion. And one day he made 14 billion additional. The supermarkets were already consolidating and increasing food miles, but the Walmarts and the Amazons really are multipliers of food miles. And all of this becomes 15 to 20%. And because this is a system based on uniformity and is a system on long distance transport, it must create food waste. And there's a very famous German book on the issue of food waste, that's 2 to 4%. Add it all together, it's between 45 to 50%. So when I did my book on soil, not oil, I'd already started to get a sense, but since then we do much more detailed measurements. And I want to show you, and for those of you who look at the issue of climate, that at the heart of the climate issue is the scientists talk about the planetary boundaries, right? Those are the planetary boundaries. What are the red zones? This red zone is the planetary boundary being ruptured of genetic diversity. That's biodiversity being killed when you promote monocultures, that gets rid of plant biodiversity, and then you use agrochemicals that kill different species. The combination of monocultures and chemicals is the driver. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity Ecosystem Services has said, if we don't change our farming method, we won't be able to protect species. This one, which is the most severe, is the rupture of the planetary boundary on nitrogen. Nitrous oxide is 300 times more damaging to the climate than carbon dioxide. But most people have been made to talk carbon, 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 emissions, 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 as if emissions come straight in a visible way. The biggest emissions come in an invisible way from the same system that's also destroying your health, the same system that's destroying the planetary metabolism. You know, I call it the planet's metabolism, the ability to maintain its temperature and climate. Gaia, what is Gaia? She organizes a climate. Our bodies are supposed to organize our sugar level. When our metabolic system gets ruptured, we get diabetes. When the Earth's metabolic system gets ruptured, she has global warming.
If we were to take that and break it down into a practical viewpoint, if I were to go into, you know, like a fresh food market versus a supermarket, what kind of products or produce or animal products have which kind of, you know, like that tail of consequences associated with it? So what am I looking at? Is it?
So if you want to become free of damaging the planetary health, and you also want to stop damaging your health, don't go to a supermarket and look at labels. Turn around and create a food community where people who want to continue farming are helped by direct links with consumers, because the link with supermarkets is destroying them. Grow your own food if you can. I have watched in Germany gardens explode in the last 20 years. But you cannot avoid creating a food community, because no amount of labeling will tell you the truth. I have watched, you know, why are people disenchanted with organic? Because the big mafia entered the organic field. Amazon bought Whole Foods. They started to cheat on organic labeling. And then people said organic is not trustworthy. No, organic in the hands of big players, dependent on a label, is not trustworthy. But your local farmer, your land, your soil is totally trustworthy. Don't give up that trust. And because the crisis is so severe, you can't buy your way out of climate change. You will have to grow your way out of climate change.
I love that sentence. That is fantastic. You talk about monocultures a lot, and there's obviously a few big crops that constitute most of what that monoculture is. What are those crops and what are they used for in the food system? Is that the food that lands on our plates, or does it go somewhere else?
Well, you know, in the 60s, the monocultures were rice, wheat, and corn. Not only because these were the big globally traded items, but this is where the Green Revolution was first applied. Yeah, the International Rice Research Institute, CIMMYT, the chemicals were first applied to these three crops. And peasants were growing these in the largest quantity, and this was being traded in the largest quantity. And then I mentioned the 80s, late 80s, the chemical companies. For ease of mentioning who they are, I just call them the poison cartel. And when people say, why do you call them a poison cartel? I say, well, they sell poisons and they function like a cartel. And it's just speaking the truth about who they are. They realized seed would be a big issue. And then they started to push the genetic engineering. And they focused on corn, on soya, on canola, and on cotton. So if you see the largest acreages growing, including in the Amazon and including in Argentina, which used to be a big wheat exporter, it is GMO soya. Because there's been a fight against GMOs in Europe, it is canola. They're just waiting for the day they'll be able to get rid of it, but it's hybrid canola and it's hybrid corn. And I feel very sad when I travel Europe, because there's monocultures of canola and monocultures of corn. And once I saw a field with absolutely uniform and leaves looking up. And I stopped, I said, I have to solve this mystery. Why are these leaves not going back to the ground the way they do in ordinary corn? And then I had to find a scientist. And they say, oh, because we improve the photosynthesis. I said, the plants don't know how to do photosynthesis if they bend down like that. I said, fascinating engineering, mechanical idea of how photosynthesis happens. So these crops have exploded. Where are they going? 90% of the corn and soya goes for biofuel and animal feed. And why does it go to biofuel and animal feed? Because they manipulated systems of subsidies so that for the farmer, it's more profitable to grow the crop, to supply a biofuel company, or to grow the crop to supply an animal feed company. So subsidies have been the other secret of industrial agriculture. And right now they're the secret of diverting 90% of the corn and soya, which are the two biggest crops expanding in the world, which is again why it's not an accident that 1 billion people are hungry. We're growing more and more in areas that never grew food before, but we are still scarce of food. So something is so wrong and broken in this system. And I'm so glad that young people like you are wanting to figure out how to be part of a system that works for the earth, for yourself, for your communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And if someone's listening
one minute,
yes,
I just remember. So we had been, I've been very much part of the European building the movement for GMO-free food because I'd done the Green Revolution. I knew what harm just chemicals could do. And I knew what harm chemicals plus GMOs would do. I could predict they'll use more more chemicals, 15 times increase in glyphosate because of Roundup Ready. So all that is, of course, causing harm. But in Europe, then they couldn't plant GMOs. In Germany, couldn't. And then, I don't know if it was Monsanto, I think it was Monsanto or somebody came up with a GMO potato. And I had a big campaign, Percy Smizer was part of it. And when we said, no, you can't feed GMO potatoes to people, said, no, this is not for food. We will grow GMO potatoes for furniture and tables and chairs. Now, don't you think that's an abuse of food? To turn potatoes into chairs? Rather than learn from indigenous people, want fewer chairs, just sit on the floor. It's very good yoga.
Love it. So if someone's listening to this for the first time and they have, there's obviously so much input that you're providing here. What would you say is some of the aha moments that you see people going through as they look into this, into the food system, into how the planet connects with their personal health? What are some of the aha moments that come along this journey?
Well, first, that we are food. Our food makes us. And our gut microbiome is the most important part of it. It's now being called the second brain. So if you want to have this brain function, take care of that brain. And you can't run away from that. And the more fake food is offered, it will pass the test of propaganda, but it will not pass the test of the 100 trillion microbes in your gut. They will decide what's worthy of eating and what's not worthy of eating. Second, the crisis is too severe. From all the data we are standing in a 10-year window to avoid a precipice. So, I always think if you're going over a precipice, you can either be stupid and put your foot on the accelerator and thinking, technology, I can drive faster. But you can only drive faster over a precipice, or you can turn around. And the turnaround is remembering that the health of the earth is our health, that biodiversity and food is what connects the soil, the plants, our health, and we have to stop thinking of ourselves as consumers. No matter how conscious you are, as a consumer, you will still be unconscious. You will not know enough. A conscious consumer has to start becoming an earth citizen. That food is not just about my eating, ignoring everything else that's connected to it. Food is about my knowing what food is, my celebrating food, my becoming part of a food movement where we know how the food was grown and becoming part of the solution. And not only are there no shortcuts, the beauty is what looks like the harder work. The chemical propaganda made it look like agriculture is hard work. And every journalist who's interviewed me, and I'll just ask them, I said, and do you garden? Oh, such beautiful work. I said, you know, a small farm and a garden is the same thing. Yeah. So let's start thinking of the world in 10 years from now as a garden of small farms and kitchen gardens and backyard gardens and school gardens and church gardens, and fill the earth with gardens and stop the war. We have two options: a war, desertifying the planet, desertifying the gut, or a celebration of a garden, regenerating the biodiversity and species of the planet. And I've done this, so I know when I talk about it, I'm not talking empty. We planted seeds. We have 6 times more pollinators. Were we inviting the pollinators? No, the plants invited them. You do your bit in the food web. The food web will cooperate with you. We are in very good company when we work with other species.
That's so encouraging to hear, because often all these big problems, they seem so insurmountable, and it's a lot of doom and gloom. And, you know, like as an individual, you might be sitting at home thinking, okay, what can I do? But how powerful really is that one person in their own little environment and world?
That one person, as a selfish person, saying the world should bend to satisfy my needs. The farmer should give me food when I need it. Amazon should deliver at my doorstep on Amazon Prime. No, a selfish consumer is driven by what is called the ego. And ego is the self separated from the rest. But we need to move from an egocentric thinking, where man is the center, you're at the center, into an ecocentric thinking, that we are part of the web of life. And then all you do is join hands, and life becomes a celebration. Life becomes joy. Life becomes regeneration. And that is our moment in the evolution of human history. We are facing collapse. But as we stand in front of collapse, we are also looking on the side at a garden inviting us. We are looking at regeneration.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shiva. This has been an amazing interview, and thank you for being here and so open and leading part of this movement. It's fantastic to talk to you and connect.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. A wise man once said, "You make a new life by making new choices." Now, if you know that what you eat matters, if you know that health comes from healthy living, then the time to make new choices is now. And just imagine owning the summit for life. Click the button for more. Maybe you know our stories. Luke and I lost family to cancer, and we wish we would have known sooner what you are learning here today. So please, share the summit, take action, and let's support each other. Thank you. This is Toby and Luke signing off, and we can't wait to see you for the next presentation.